Okay, anybody here like the whole idea about unjust suffering? No, it's one of my least favorite subjects. There's a certain kind of pain, I think, that goes with having done no wrong, and yet somebody sets out to mess up your day. It's hard. It's hard. But even this, Jesus is saying, even this may be good news. So, how do we get to the joy of good news from the subject of unjust suffering? Well, we pay attention to what God's intent is. Look, in a perfect world, there would be no such thing as unjust suffering, right? Because that's part of what it means to live in a perfect world. When we're having perfect times in our life, everything fits, everything works together, and it's all just beautiful. In a just world, there would be no unjust suffering. But that's not the world we live in. And see, God has this problem. He loves all of us, including people who are unjust. And sometimes it is precisely the unjust suffering that brings a person back to the rightful mind. So they stop doing it. And they become more the person that God intended them to be. Were you ever forgiven growing up? You know what that means? It means that you did something that hurt somebody else. You were being unjust yourself. And rather than holding a grudge against you, rather than holding a penalty against you, rather than whatever they were, quote, entitled to do, they didn't. And it impressed you that you'd harmed somebody and you didn't want to do it again. Right? You know what I'm talking about? It's just that it looks different when somebody has harmed us, and we don't know whether or not they're going to understand or accept our response to their hurt. And we know we have no control over what they're going to do. But we follow the example of Christ and hope that this time they'll see and they'll understand and they will change. Even though we know that's up to them. We can't make them. We can invite them into a new understanding of this part of their life. But we can't make them. Any more than Jesus could make us. Have you ever come to the realization that some of the things you do are not great? And you've been doing them for some time? I wish I could say I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm afraid that I do. And I suspect we all do, don't we? But what's it like to get on the other side and to change? I had a woman call the church last week. She was in town because her family was getting together because somebody had died over the winter and they couldn't all get together. And guess what? She was having trouble with a member of her family. Are there any troubling people in your family? Well, there was in hers. And she wasn't feeling right about it. She'd been a member of this church, but she hadn't been here in 30 years. But she called up because she remembered somebody was kind to her once upon a time here, I guess. But she came and she was kind of apologetic, and she said, "I know you don't know me, but I remember going to Sunday school here and having been a part of this church before leaving town." And then she started talking about what it was she was upset about. It turned out it was a particular cousin that she knew was going to be there. And she said, I know I shouldn't feel this way, but I have trouble being in the same room with her. Has there ever been anybody like that in your life? There certainly was in her life. And she was going through it right now, and they were getting together to honor somebody who had died, and she didn't want to lose it with her cousin in front of her family. You understand that sort of situation, don't you? I hope you've never been in it. I have. And she just felt like she needed to talk to somebody before she went and spent the afternoon in the same room with her cousin. So, okay, I knew absolutely nothing about her. She was a total stranger. Sometimes it's easier, by the way, to go to a stranger, isn't it? That you know you never have to see him again. If they think that you're an idiot, you never have to see him again. You're not going to run into a price chopper. Sometimes being a stranger is a very beautiful thing in somebody's life. But she started talking about what it was that upset her about her cousin. And I looked at her, and the words from Paul came to me. Do words come to you from time to time when you're trying to understand something you don't quite understand? You're not quite sure what to say or whatever. But the words that came to me were, why are you accusing another of the things you do yourself? Well, that seemed a little harsh. So I smiled at her and said, does your cousin remind you of yourself? Dead silence. And then she heaved a huge sigh. And she said, Pastor, she's so much like me, I can't stand her. All righty, hey, she's not the only one. And I could just see this weight going off of her. You know what I mean about a weight going off somebody's shoulders? It's not because just because it's the right time, the right place, the right moment, the right word came to you. You open your mouth, you say something or not quite. I didn't realize where that had come from until afterwards. I said, that's familiar. And I realized it was from Paul. And you're just in the right place at the right time. You open your mouth and God works through you. And you see a weight go off another person. And you know a family gathering is going to go a whole lot better this afternoon, at least for her, than it would have. How does that feel to be at the right place at the right time, to say the right word and see a weight go off somebody else? Is that wonderful? Is that good news? Has that happened to you? It's happened to me. Part of this whole unjust suffering thing is the recognition that when someone else is sitting there saying, I feel like doing stuff that I know isn't right, they don't really need you to look at them and say, yeah, you're right, honey, that's just terrible. Did that ever help you? It never helped me. But to sit there and help someone to see God's honest truth. Remember, it's the truth that sets us free. And that's a beautiful thing. And that's what Peter is doing here. He's talking to us about God's honest truth to open up our eyes to the unjust suffering in our own life. It's happened. No one can make it unhappen. It's there. And the question isn't, has it happened to you? Because it has. The question is, what do you do? Peter says that what Jesus did is when he was suffering these things, he kept his Father in heaven in mind and what his purpose on earth was. It's not about what he was suffering. It was about what God could do with his time in his life. Now, what did God do with his time in Jesus' life? Well, let's see. At the Last Supper, Peter stands up and he says, I'll never abandon you. And before the cock crows 3 times, he's denied Jesus 3 times. Now, if you're Peter, what do you do with that? Have you ever had a friend in trouble and ducked because you didn't want to get into trouble yourself? Wouldn't it be nice if we could say no? What happened with Peter? Well, Jesus had said, you're going to be the rock upon which I build the church, and he slunk back with the 11 remaining, or the 10 remaining, and he didn't feel so good about himself, did he? He was meant to be the leader, and he just done that. What do you do with that? I'll remind you what Jesus did with that. About a week later, he had gone back to fishing because he'd given up. I mean, how could he lead anyone having done what he did? He was back fishing. He'd given up. And we came to shore. Jesus was sitting there fixing breakfast. Think about that. This is how God handles the things that we're ashamed of. Peter ate breakfast with Jesus. And then Jesus looked at him and said, do you love me? Think about Peter for a minute. How would that affect you to hear the words, do you love me, from the person you denied 3 times after having said, I'd rather die? And he said, yes. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. Has it ever helped you to hear anyone say, why on earth, how could you ever have done that? But that's not God. That's not Jesus. Do you love me? Yes. Then the only thing I want from you is for you to learn from your experience and then go feed my sheep. Jesus had no need for Peter or anyone else to be stuck in their past mistakes, unable to move forward. Jesus said, the only thing that matters now, Peter, is for you to learn from what you have done and go out and be a blessing to other people. Have you ever done anything you're ashamed of? Fortunately, I haven't. My wife will tell you that. The only thing that God asks of us when we realize that that wasn't so great is to use it in order to bless other people in the future. That's all that God asks. So who are we to ask more of ourselves? Who are we to expect that we should never have done it in the first place? It says here that Jesus remembers the just judge. The just judge looks at how we can use ourselves, the mistakes that we have made, the things that we have done wrong in anger or in ignorance or however we got ourselves there, and make something of it for tomorrow that's a blessing to other people. Have you ever sat down with someone and started talking to them about something that was important to them and realized that they understood. They understood what was in your heart. Where does understanding come from? I think it mostly comes from they messed up themselves in some way that was similar. Came to accept that and moved on in their life. So when they hear someone talking to them struggling with something similar, they can say from the inside, I understand. And you know it's true. And you know it's true. How often have you been blessed by somebody that understood something of your walk because they had walked a similar path? What does it feel like to be understood? Isn't it the difference between being alone and being with a companion? Isn't it the difference between being burdened and sitting there and seeing there are new possibilities in life? I don't have to stay here. Isn't it a wonderful thing to be understood? And isn't it a wonderful thing to be able to understand another? Even though we don't usually think, that's because I messed up, dealt with it, changed, am living a different life. But now I can reach and help someone take a step forward. Isn't that precious? How else do we get there? You see, in a perfect world, there would be no need for unjust suffering. Because none of us would be stuck somewhere and in need of forgiveness and of understanding and of new hope. But the beauty of that is because we're doing for another what someone has done for us. And one last thing. When Jesus was crucified, there were two thieves, one to the right and one to the left. Now, these were not somebody that took a loaf of bread in order to feed their family. Rome did not crucify people who were taking bread to feed their family because there was a famine or that sort of thing. These were career criminals that hurt one person after another, enriching themselves at other people's money and hurting them in the way. So here are these two men that had 10 years or 20 years or a rap sheet like this. They were bad people in anybody's society. And one of them was ridiculing Jesus. There was something about the situation that really, really bothered him. And he was just dumping on Jesus. And the other career thief, for all we know he was his partner, looked at him and said, hey, do you have no fear of God whatsoever? Look, we're all under the same sentence, but the difference is we deserve it, and he doesn't. If you were Jesus, how would you be struck by hearing a career thief turn to someone who had just been ridiculing them and saying, we deserve it. He doesn't. And listening to the other man shut up like that. Have you ever been in a difficult situation and really needed to hear that somebody understood and cared and treated you appropriately in the middle of it all. Hey, I know that moment. But it wasn't until this week, and I was thinking about this sermon, that I realized that it was that sort of moment in Jesus' life. And he's teaching us to do the same for each other. And when we come to him, to understand that he understands. Jesus looked at him and he said, the thief said, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Remember me, O Lord, when you come into your kingdom. And what did Jesus say? Today, you'll be with me in paradise. Think about that. Think about what that man had been forgiven of. Is there any more powerful way that you can hear that your old foolishness that sometimes hangs around like dog breath, your old resentments, your old hurts, Isaiah said that what God does, it's like the mist in the morning. Out comes the sun and he blots it. And it's gone away. We remember it was there, but it no longer interferes with our life. I'm going to ask you to join with me in singing the thief's words. Remember me, O Lord, when I come into my kingdom. And those of you who know the song, the words won't be up. And that's number 227 in the hymnal. Now, is that good news? And is it good news that you, from time to time, have the opportunity to relieve another person from their shame? So the burden goes away, and they begin to live in the freedom of the children of God. This promise is true for you. This day you will be with me in paradise. And it's true. When you lift another person's burden because of the truth you know and live. And that's a beautiful thing.